Christians, don't let anyone tell you birth control is a sin.
Oops! Oh no! Based upon the science of how sex works, you should only be having sex with someone who you are excited to have a baby with.
Felt it in my spirit, him saying, you don't trust me with everything in your life because you're still using contraception.
This is where religion, not God, comes into play.
Jesus did not give us a Bible, he gave us a church. Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So 2 videos ago, I uploaded a different type of video called Atheist Cringe, responding to an atheist YouTuber named Jacqueline Glenn. You guys love the video style of responding to another YouTuber, so I decided to make a video called Protestant Cringe, responding to a Protestant YouTuber. This YouTuber's name is God is Gray. Her name is Brenda. Interestingly enough, just like Jacqueline Glenn, God is Gray is also an ex-Catholic. I absolutely love Brenda's YouTube channel. I love watching her videos. I agree with so many of the videos that she's made. I think she's so spiritually healthy and coming from the most loving, healing, peaceful place. She clearly is so close to God, and I think that her faith is so beautiful. So as a non-Catholic, a topic that we do majorly disagree on is birth control. Like Jacqueline, she also makes a lot of response videos to other Christian YouTube channels that she views as problematic. The video I'm going to be responding to today is called Paul and Morgan Are So Wrong About Birth Control. So you might recognize the Paul and Morgan YouTube channel from the Atheist Cringe video that I made. On this subject in particular, you will see shockingly that they actually agree with the Catholic teaching on birth control.
Birth control to condoms to absolutely nothing. We were fully leaving it to the Lord to just like make up his mind. I heard him, felt it in my spirit, him saying, you don't trust me with everything in your life because you're still using contraception.
I was shocked and so amazed and proud of this young Protestant couple for basically, based on their own intuition, coming to the truths of Christian sexual ethics. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Lizzie's Answers. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell button next to the subscribe button so that you get notifications every time I upload a new video. Also, make sure to be following me on my Instagram and my Twitter. I love talking with you guys throughout the week and updating you on what I'm doing every day. I have created a Patreon which allows me to keep doing YouTube full-time, patreon.com/LizziesAnswers, and that is linked below. So let's get into the video.
Hi beautiful people. This week we're talking about Paul and Morgan's ill-timed birth control video. This video, no matter how angry I get, is not about attacking Paul and Morgan as people. I respect them. I believe that they are wholeheartedly in pursuit of God. However, I feel it very necessary to offer a different Christian perspective.
So starting off, Sola Scriptura is the reason that we have these 2 Protestant YouTube channels who are each going by the Bible but coming to basically opposite conclusions on a really important topic of sexuality, of the meaning of sex.
So let's break down this Paul and Morgan video point by point.
We are revisiting birth control.
Paul and I went from using birth control to condoms to absolutely nothing. We were fully leaving it to the Lord to just like make up his mind if he was going to create a baby in me or not.
So this is one of the main points that Morgan reiterates in the video. God will never let you get pregnant unless it's his will.
So this seems really problematic and not at all what she was saying. I think there's definitely exceptions that Morgan would agree with. For example, if someone is raped, I don't think it's God's plan for a woman to be raped and to become pregnant. Rape is an intrinsic evil. Obviously, the child that is conceived by rape, it is a human life and it's a beautiful human life. There are 2 aspects of God's will, his active will and his permissive will. So his permissive will would allow a pregnancy to happen through rape, but his active will would not choose that to happen for a woman. So I think it's not being charitable on the part of Brenda to assume that Morgan means in every situation ever when there is pregnancy, it's God's active will in the entire situation. I don't at all think that's what she was saying. Something I will say though is that God's will, his active will, is for sex to be procreative.
Pregnant unless it's his will. As a science-believing Christian, I completely disagree.
And something that Brenda says throughout her video, she's constantly talking about science, being a science-minded Christian. Objectively, biologically, according to the science, sex is procreative. It's biologically ingrained into what sex is and what sex does. God created sex as a beautiful thing. He created it to be procreative.
Women get pregnant when, during ovulation, a sperm fertilizes an egg.
God works through science. He works through the biology of sex. And so it is his will for pregnancy to happen when a couple has sex. It is not his active will for people to be having sex outside of marriage and outside of a situation in which they're willing to bring a child into the world.
The Bible makes it very clear that we are not God's puppets. God's free will says we are permitted to make mistakes. He lets us fall. He's not a helicopter parent. He doesn't control what we do. Therefore, our lives are a series of choices and the effect those choices have on our lives. I have a period and ovulation app on my phone and it tells me when I'm high risk or low risk for pregnancy.
So I used to think like this too when I was Protestant. I saw pregnancy as a negative thing, as a risk. Even within a marriage, I found it so appalling and invasive and scary, the idea to become pregnant when you're not intentionally planning on being pregnant. But I had a false understanding of sex. I was ignoring the objective biology that sex leads to procreation and that God created sex for procreation and the unity of the couple.
This chart is not infallible, but it gives me an idea of my cycle. If I, in my own God-given free will, choose to have sex when I'm at high risk of pregnancy, biology can get me pregnant.
Yeah, biology is getting you pregnant, but God is working through the biology.
When people give the argument of, well, if God wants me pregnant, he'll make me pregnant, it's like, why are you like challenging God?
That's a good question, Morgan. Why are you telling your audience to ignore science and challenge God to not get you pregnant? God, I'm ovulating. My husband's not gonna pull out. I dare you not to get us pregnant. You're not encouraging faith. You're encouraging irresponsibility.
So I've watched other videos on Paul and Morgan's YouTube channel, and they actually encourage couples to not have sex outside of marriage. And so I don't think it's irresponsible to be encouraging married couples to be procreative and to trust God with all of themselves, to trust God with every part of their sexuality. I think that Brenda's coming into this assuming that their audience is having sex outside of marriage, but I think that if you interpret them charitably and see their videos as a whole, Paul and Morgan are coming into this with a sexual ethic where sex belongs in marriage, in a procreative situation. And so it's not irresponsible encouraging married couples to have children.
Telling your audience God will protect them from their own irresponsibility is like telling people not to wear seatbelts because God will protect you if you're in an accident.
Whoa! Why are we suddenly comparing pregnancy to dying in a car crash? Yes, sometimes in rare situations, women can die during pregnancy, but in the majority of cases, a baby being created is not a car crash. It's the exact opposite. Instead of life ending horrifically in a car crash, life is beginning in the most beautiful, enchanting, amazing way in the womb.
God could protect you in a car crash, but out of 32,598 deaths, 19,103 people were not wearing seatbelts. Seatbelts would have helped. Why test God?
I don't get it. Why she's comparing pregnancy to a car crash.
Why not just give your your total trust to the Lord. Give everything you're holding on to the Lord and just let him do his thing.
It's pretty funny how she's zooming in on the husband Paul in the video because his facial expression, I don't know why his face is making that expression, because I'm sure that he agrees with his wife that they're perfectly on the same page when it comes to this. But I actually think it's really, really beautiful what Morgan is saying.
Why not just give your total trust to the Lord? Give everything you're holding on to the Lord and just let him do his thing.
No more seatbelts, no more chemotherapy.
Now she is comparing a baby being conceived to having cancer.
No more worrying about walking down dark alleys by yourself. Just challenge God to bend the laws of physics, biology, science, and free will on your behalf.
And going down dark alleys at night, so she means getting pickpocketed, harmed, sexually assaulted. Maybe that's too far, assuming she means sexual assault. But going down a dark alley, she's a woman saying this, it just seems so extreme to me to be comparing a baby to dying in a car accident, having cancer, being attacked in a dark alley. How are these things comparable?
We are not animals. We are given intuition, but we are also given wisdom and knowledge, and with that comes personal responsibility.
It's interesting that she says here that we are not animals, because I would say the same thing in support of natural family planning and no birth control. We are not animals, and so we're fully capable in marriages of not having sex for a week out of every month and focusing on other parts of the marriage, like focusing on prayer as St. Paul commands us in 1 Corinthians. And when it comes to people who are not married, it's totally possible to have a relationship where you don't have sex and have really strong physical boundaries. I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years and we don't have sex, and we have an amazing, exciting, flourishing relationship. And the reason we're able to sustain this and not have sex is because we know that we are not animals and we're not bowing to these carnal instincts.
And here's a bit of potential irony. Later in the video, Morgan is vague but seems to be talking about medical intervention.
It's been 2 years. You need to get tested. Something's wrong with you guys. I will go into more detail of that in a different video, but we have both been tested and things are looking up.
What she said is so vague, it becomes more of a question than a rebuttal, but I really mean it. I'm really curious. Paul and Morgan, are you looking into fertility options? This is what you guys are talking about. Are you implying that you make an exception to bowing to God's will, to his divine design for your fertility, only when it comes to wanting to have a baby?
So this is where Catholics are extremely 100% consistent in all of our sexual ethics. Number one, we are against in vitro fertilization because that causes abortions of embryos. Many embryos get aborted. The zygote is never given the opportunity to attach to the uterine lining. The embryo is never able to become a baby. So if you guys are new Catholics or wanting to convert in and you didn't know, the church's stance is that we have to be against in vitro fertilization. But there are other means of getting pregnant, of increasing fertility. There are shots and possibly pills, but I think it's injections that women can take that have hormones that make it more likely to be fertile and to get pregnant, and the church totally allows that. The reason we are so consistent is because we allow natural family planning, and during the days when you can conceive, not high-risk days, we don't call them high-risk days, but during days when you are the most likely to conceive a child, you cannot have sex for that period of time to space out your children. Or if you're like in an economically fragile situation, you're finishing school, you have a medical issue. I know me with my bipolar disorder, if my bipolar is bad, I would have to go off meds to get pregnant, and so we're definitely going to use natural family planning for a medical reason for my bipolar.
Is birth control a distrust in God, but fertility intervention more holy? How is that fair?
The reason I believe it's fair is because the whole trusting God part means trusting God to provide when you have a child. And by provide, I don't just mean monetarily, I mean emotionally, spiritually. There's so many ways that you have to provide for and take care of a child.
If a baby is the desire of their heart, they should pursue that dream. But I have to point out how Christians can be so imbalanced when we favor reproduction over family planning.
So again, this is not a dichotomy. Fertility and family planning go together. So back to God's will, it is God's active will for marriage to result in procreation in children. And so obviously it's within God's will for a married couple to become pregnant. And that can include injections. It can also include natural family planning during the days when you are most likely to become pregnant, intentionally having sex during those days to get pregnant. All of that is within God's will and his plan for marriage and for sex.
Also, the way Morgan speaks about conviction from God is something I deeply relate to.
Just heard him, felt it in my spirit, him saying, you don't trust me with everything in your life because you're still using contraception.
This is so beautiful. This is such an amazing moment in the video. I relate her so much to Kimberly Hahn, her experience researching birth control when she was in grad school as a Protestant, coming to the conclusion with her husband Scott Hahn that because they were using birth control, they were not trusting God with all of who they were. And so I applaud Paul and Morgan so much that as Protestants, they were able to figure out and just intuitively feel spiritually grow closer to God by realizing that you're not surrendering all of yourself to God if you do use birth control.
I am not here to doubt Morgan or to say God didn't speak to her. And I'm absolutely not shaming her for not using birth control. It's her body, it's her life.
They're going to say, that's not the case for me. I'm still living surrendered to the Lord, and I feel totally at peace with contraception.
Paul is right. Christians can get supposedly divine answers that completely contradict one another.
Which again is caused by sola scriptura. This is why you need the teaching magisterium, the oral tradition since the 1st century onward, which interprets the Bible, which has always interpreted the Bible as being against birth control.
Even though Paul and Morgan say, hey, these are our personal convictions, you guys can make choices on your own. When you say, God said using birth control is not surrendered, is not trusting him, you can cause a lot of spiritual anxiety in other people.
I absolutely agree. It caused so much spiritual anxiety in me when I was becoming Catholic and having to change my mind on the birth control teaching. The birth control teaching was even harder to accept than all of the Marian dogmas. Accepting that Mary is sinless was easier for me to accept than that I would have to be against birth control in marriage. I felt so scared and uncomfortable and nervous and violated. The idea that when I am married, I could get pregnant without intentionally wanting to get pregnant. It was just not a concept in my mind then that sex is intrinsically interlocked with having children. And I know that sounds really invalidating, and I invalidated myself because I was wrong. I was objectively wrong on birth control. The church fathers from the very beginning of the church, from the 1st century onward, Christians were always against birth control. It wasn't until the past couple hundred years within Protestantism where so many Christians have begun accepting birth control. The Protestant reformers like Martin Luther were vehemently against birth control.
Not to mention, any of us, no matter how aligned we are with God, is susceptible to confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. If she's attending a church that calls birth control into question, she may experience confirmation bias in her prayer life.
So this is interesting. Maybe the Protestant church that she's attending is actually encouraging couples to not use birth control. That would be so cool. I super wonder what denomination it is or what church that she's going to. It totally seemed from her video though that this was kind of an individual experience that she was having. So it's completely like Kimberly and Scott. Huh, that's what Paul and Morgan are like.
And I am not saying Morgan didn't hear from God, but I am saying that you are allowed to question absolutely everything that I claim, that Paul and Morgan claim, that Girl Defined claims, that your pastor claims is a message from God. Also, birth control is not addressed in the Bible. Yes, Adam and Eve were called to be fruitful and multiply, but they were also supposed to be the very first and only people on earth. So that does not make it a call for everyone.
So absolutely, I agree with her here that there are not strong biblical arguments. I know a lot of Catholics will disagree with me, but from my perspective as a Protestant, there are not objective things in the Bible saying birth control is wrong, saying sex always needs to be procreative and unitive. That's why you need church tradition. If you look at church tradition from the very beginning, Christians have always been against birth control. So I'm reading some quotes from this book. I recommended it in my video, Top 20 Theology Books to Read. It is called The Fathers Know Best by Jimmy Akin, and it has some quotes in it of church fathers actually talking about birth control in the very early church. Clement of Alexandria in the 2nd century. Because of its divine institution for the propagation of man, the seed is not to be vainly ejaculated, nor is it to be damaged, nor is it to be wasted. To have coitus other than to procreate children is to do injury to nature. Saint Hippolytus of Rome, writing in the late 2nd, early 3rd century. Women, reputed believers, began to resort to drugs to produce sterility and to gird themselves round, so to expel what was being conceived on account of their not wishing to have a child, either by a slave or any paltry fellow, for the sake of their family and excessive wealth. Behold, into how great impiety that lawless one has proceeded, by committing adultery and murder at the same time. Saint Chrysostom, writing in the 4th century, says this: in truth, all men know that they who are under the power of this disease are wearied, even of their father's old age, and what is sweet and universally desirable, the having children, they esteem grievous and unwelcome. Many with this view have even paid money to be childless, and have maimed their nature not only by slaying their children after birth, but by not suffering them to be born at all. Saint Augustine, also writing in the 4th century, this proves that you, the Manichaeans, approve of having a wife not for the procreation of children, but for the gratification of passion. In marriage, as the marriage law declares, the man and woman come together for the procreation of children. Therefore, whoever makes the procreation of children a greater sin than copulation forbids marriage and makes the woman not a wife but a mistress, who for some gifts presented to her is joined to the man to gratify his passion. Let me know if you want me to make an entire video talking about what the church fathers believed about birth control and abortion, but those were just a few examples from the very early church that I wanted to share.
As for why people use birth control, Paul and Morgan say,
if your reasons aren't the big ones, which in my case was fear, in many cases is selfishness, there is potential that you could have a good reason, but I would say the potential for those reasons is more rare.
I have a few more reasons. Endometriosis, debilitating cramps, and women that are susceptible to high-risk pregnancies. Women who cannot risk getting pregnant for fear of their own lives and for the life of that baby.
So again, I think that this isn't being very charitable to Paul and Morgan. They were talking about reasons that they had for not wanting to have a baby, and they saw them as not being valid reasons to postpone starting a family. I don't think they're at all saying that they're against birth control in the case of medical reasons. And as a Catholic, the Catholic Church officially allows birth control for medical reasons. Like if you have ovarian cysts, that will kill you. Even if you have painful periods, you're allowed to use birth control as a Catholic. Even if you're married, you're allowed to use the birth control for valid medical reasons. Aquinas has something called the principle of double effects. And so if you're on birth control when you are married, the double effect is preventing pregnancy. But that's not a sin because the reason you are using the birth control is for the medical reason. So it's called the principle of double effects. I learned it in my ethics class in college. It was the most random thing that we talked about. And so then several years later, it becomes extremely relevant to understanding Catholic sexual ethics.
Christians, don't let anyone tell you birth control is a sin.
Oops! Oh no! The tens of thousands of people who have watched my videos against birth control shouldn't be listening to me.
I personally don't know where our society would be without the contributions of childless women like Diane Sawyer, Oprah, Gloria Steinem, Condoleezza Rice, Sonia Sotomayor, Elizabeth Gilbert, Susan B. Anthony, and Jane Austen, to name a few. But this is where religion, not God, comes into play.
So she's creating a dichotomy between religion and God. But the reality is that when Jesus was on earth, he started a religion. He appointed the apostles who created the church. You can read about it in Acts 2. Jesus did not give us a Bible. He did not give us a list of morals to follow. He gave us a church. Jesus started a religion. So something really important that I think Brenda is missing is that you don't have to get married. Some of the women who she mentioned were not married. They were unmarried. And I think it is so incredible and amazing. I mean, within the Catholic Church, so many of the female and male saints didn't have children and were unmarried and were some of the most amazing contributors to theology. Women without children, women who were not married, are some of the most incredible saints. And like she listed, non-Catholics in society, so many women without children have been such amazing contributors to society. In fact, I think that more people should opt to join religious life as a nun or a monk because I think we can use our singleness so much in promoting the kingdom.
This is where religion, not God, comes into play. Are women worthy of prioritizing education and career before devoting themselves to motherhood?
So Morgan has a career right now. She is a YouTuber. And so I don't at all think that Paul and Morgan are saying women shouldn't work, women shouldn't have careers, women should only be moms. She has a career right now. She's a YouTuber and she can continue being a YouTuber when she is a mom. I know that for me, I'm gonna keep working when I am a mom.
Am I allowed to set up my life financially, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, so that my child has the benefit of all my preparedness?
Am I ready to be a dad? Are you ready to be a mom?
Those are valid questions couples need to ask.
I think you should not get married unless you are ready to be a dad or a mom. I think you should never have sex unless you're ready to be a dad or a mom. Because biologically, that's what sex is. That's what sex produces. Sex leads to having children. And so you shouldn't be engaging in sex unless you are ready to be a parent. Based upon the science of how sex works, you should only be having sex with someone who you are excited to have a baby with and to parent. Okay, so I agree and disagree with both of them here. I think that number one, you can balance having a child and going to school. You can balance having a child and having a career. I think that, again, we live in such a materialistic society, and so I think we have these extremes of thinking, oh, I need to finish my PhD program, I need to work for 10 years, establish my career before having children. I think that we push back and push back and push back. But a lot of times we can have children when we're going through that. My boyfriend just started a 6-year PhD program, and we plan on starting a family and having children when he's still in school, even though he wouldn't have started his career yet. At the same time, the Catholic Church totally promotes the use of natural family planning. If you are really, really busy finishing school, or at the very beginning starting a career, absolutely, you can push back having children a couple of years. You can space out your children. That's absolutely encouraged and accepted in the church.
Am I ready to be a dad? Are you ready to be a mom?
Those are valid questions couples need to ask. To feel guilt and shame about being intellectual and thoughtful on whether or not you're ready to bring a child into the world is ridiculous. In my opinion, Paul's thoughts were not based in fear. He was exercising wisdom.
And so what I want to get across in this video is that there is not a dichotomy between not using birth control and not having a career. You can use natural family planning and still have all of these other things of being able to have enough money to support the family, of being able to go to school.
A lot of people, women, are looking for fulfillment in jobs, in school, in relationships, in friendships, whatever.
And Morgan got it right when she said,
A lot of people, women,
because yes, it is the woman's life that is put on hold or potentially overtaken by the role of being a mother.
But this is also messed up. The guy's life should dramatically change too when they have a baby. It should be a shared effort with parenting the child. For me, I can't breastfeed because I have to go back on my bipolar meds, and my bipolar meds would go through the breast milk and harm the child. So bottle feeding is the way we're gonna go in the Rize family. I'm just kidding. Trevor's not gonna take my YouTube alias last name. So anyways, there's gonna be co-parenting going on. So I absolutely disagree with the idea that the woman's life should completely change, that only the woman's life should completely change when you have a baby. When you have a married couple together, you should be married with the expectation of parenting together.
The last thing I'll talk about is the privilege of their personal perspective. The couple on the right is currently pregnant, wanted to make a baby, and even though their insurance lapsed, they have it now and are taken care of.
God has provided us both with like amazing jobs, like with health insurance.
It just made us realize like, wow, like I feel like God is giving us ideas on how we could even like sustain having a family.
Meanwhile, according to the Census Bureau, 27.3 million Americans were uninsured in 2016. Here in Los Angeles, with basic insurance, I have a $6,000 deductible, and I would still be responsible for 40% of all services provided during a pregnancy. Having a baby means I could be liable for up to $150,000. That's the cost of having a child while insured.
Now, I absolutely agree here. It is horrific, audacious in this country how expensive it is to have a baby. That's why so many women get abortions. It's around $800 to get an abortion, but to give birth, it's $3,000 with insurance, $9,000 without insurance, and that can go up to $27,000 if you have complications during birth, like having a C-section. And that's not even including prenatal appointments. What needs to happen is when a woman gets pregnant, they need to do a DNA test and start charging the guy who got her pregnant to be paying for the prenatal appointments and paying for the birth. It's this insane burden on women. Our country is not pro-life, it's not pro-baby when it is this expensive and unrealistic to have a child. It's insane. It's such a horrible, godless society that we're dealing with a situation where people feel like they have to abort their child because they cannot afford to have a baby.
According to the National Center for Children in Poverty, Black, American Indian, and Hispanic children are disproportionately low income and poor. They experience energy and housing insecurity, and children who are poor are less likely to achieve important adult milestones, such as graduating from high school, enrolling in, and completing college.
But this is why it's important to only have sex in marriage. I talked about this in my atheist cringe video responding to Jacqueline Glenn. Not only do you decrease your divorce rate down to 5% by only having sex in marriage, but you also increase your net income once you are married and do start a family, and you even decrease your children's chances of doing drugs or becoming criminals.
Do I as a Christian believe that God can provide when you have a baby? Yes. Do I also acknowledge that the uninsured, people in poverty, people on welfare can also be Christian?
He was going to provide.
He
Exactly.
will.
That's-
And if that's true, what are the privileged implying? Did those in poverty not pray hard enough? If your child can't afford the school lunch, is it because you didn't believe in God's provision? And this is perhaps the difference between my view and Paul and Morgan's.
Now, I absolutely agree here. I think that the Paul and Morgan video is almost veering towards the prosperity gospel, and we need to be really, really careful. I think that the prosperity gospel has seeped into so many Protestant churches, even into Catholicism, and so we need to be really careful and not wound our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ who are in poverty and make it seem like if you are in an economically disadvantaged situation that God isn't blessing you. That's absolutely not the case. Just like at the beginning of the video where we were talking about God's active will and his passive will allows a lot of poverty to happen, and that's not in his plan. That's not God's active will in the world. That is everything I wanted to respond to in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below other YouTubers you'd like me to respond to. Again, make sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button next to the subscribe button, and make sure to be following me on my Instagram and my Twitter. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!